I like that. And I've wondered if this was a bag of money, what it was, if they could pull out portions and be able to trade those for other things in order to get increase the value. However it was, they were able to do that in the parable. And then the one servant dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. And what does that symbolize when we think about it?
It could be fear.
Yeah. I think it's evident that it was some fear involved because he did fear his master. But I made a note here to myself that he put his talents on the shelf and did as he pleased, without showing respect to the servant, the master that had given it to him. Sure.
Well, and fear could have caused two things in that situation. It could have caused him to bury it so it wouldn't be lost. But our fear of God should make us go out and sow the seed.
Very true.
Make excuse. There was an excuse to it that this was not my problem.
Yeah, kind of typical of what we read in biblical history, isn't it?
Well, he's called a slothful servant. I think implied in that there's some laziness on his part. He didn't do what he had the ability to do. You noticed earlier that when the master went into a far country, he divided some of these talents to each servant according to his several ability. This man just didn't use his. He had the ability. And you mentioned it was a sizable sum, about 20 years worth of wages. And he didn't do anything with it.
Nothing.
He could have took it to the bank.
Yep. Could have taken it to the bank, gotten that interest. As far as the symbolism, again, the master returning after a long time, what does that symbolize? Exactly. And the master came and settled accounts with them. And when Jesus returns, we'll give an accounting of ourselves just the same. Turn to Psalms 50, Psalm number 50. Starting with the first verse. 50. And who would like to read the first 15 verses of Psalm 50?
I'll go. Okay. This is ESV. Psalm 50, verses 1 to 15. The mighty one, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes, he does not keep silence. Before him is the devouring fire, around him a mighty tempest. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather to me my faithful ones, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me.
So the key thing here is that everything belongs to God. Everything we are, everything we have, everything we say we own, we don't really own it. God owns it. So those are listed out right there in the Psalm. In this parable, the responsibility given was enormous. Just how enormous was it? And how can we see what that symbolized? What I mean is, if we take the values that we're talking about, this was not some small test that these servants were given. Those 5 talents, as we've talked about a little bit in different figures, but those 5 talents would be about 100 years in wages. I mean, that's enormous. And who gives that kind of money to a servant in order to invest and do something with it? Today's value, somewhere around $750,000. That's just huge. The 2 talents, same type of multiplication, 40 years of wages, about $300,000 in value today. And then, of course, the 1 talent that he buried was 20 years worth of wages and about $150,000. And can you imagine giving someone that works for you, or if you're working for someone, can you imagine that kind of money exchanging hands and then leaving the country? It's pretty incredible. And our talents are highly valued by God, and it's the same thing. So it was the enormity of it. We can compare that to what God expects of us. God has not given us abilities or responsibilities of little value. He gives us great talents and expects major effort and results from us. So also, as far as enormity, the rewards given were also enormous. And my thoughts are the master never apologizes for judging each servant's ability. It doesn't matter how the servant feels, it matters how the master feels and what he expects. Our focus really should be on the master, not the servant. And Jesus does not apologize that some people get more than others. He only looks at what we do with what we have. Jesus makes no exceptions for those who get less. He expects nothing. They expect something from everyone. And the servant that got 5 talents and the servant that got 2 talents both worked hard, and they put the talents at risk and doubled the master's money. They were profitable, and that's what God expects of us. When we look at the servant with the 1 talent, he really did the opposite. I mean, he buried it and just out of sight, out of mind. And I think maybe I can say I've done that before, and maybe not as much as I used to, but I think we all can look at ourselves and see where we can do a little bit better and do a little bit more with what we've been given. And it's very important. And if anybody has any comments or questions, just butt in on me. Yes, sir.
When I look at the 1 talent individual, I look at him as scared. And it's not, I think it's because he doesn't know his master well enough to go and do what he needs to do. And I think we get into the same boat ourselves sometimes, because we sometimes are fearful, but it ends up we need to press that fear down and go ahead and press on.
You know, I really looked at it more as lazy in this than fearful.
It ends up, it could be taken either way, and I don't know. Again, we're not given that detail. I know he says he's slothful, and normally when we think of somebody who's slothful, we think of well, maybe that word we don't use very much. Lazy we use.
But you know, I don't think you're completely wrong. I don't mean to say that you're completely wrong about that.
It's okay. It's just, when I look at it, it's more, he's afraid. And it's kind of like in jobs. If you've got somebody who you've given a task to go do it, you expect them to carry out that particular task. If they don't, and oh, by the way, they didn't come back and get clarification, what did you really want done? Then they are not doing their part.
I see your point. That's very true. And there is some fear involved. So sure. You bet.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you see in the text of the excuses that this one talent man offers a kind of an attitude that he's proud of himself for not losing it? And kind of pats himself on the back that he thought he had the wisdom to take it out and bury it.
Absolutely.
But he had another choice. He would not have lost it if he had put it in the bank, just simply drawn rate of interest.
Mhm.
But he evidently didn't think of that. So he buried it and made nothing.
Which I think that goes to the laziness part of it. And I can kind of picture that person, can't you?
His master didn't brag on it.
Yes.
Seems like he was both. He describes himself as being afraid, and then the master characterized him as slothful. So you could combine fear and sloth at the same time, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
I think ultimately it comes back to a lack of faith. He didn't have faith in the master trusting him with the talent to go and do what the master asked him to do. And we see the opposite with the other two, where they understood and had faith in their master that whatever they decided to do with it, he was okay with, because he had entrusted it to them.
I just keep going back to how much money that was.
But it doesn't say he gave it to them. It says he entrusted them
Exactly.
with it.
It was always his.
That's correct. And I think it goes back to what Dad said, that they didn't understand who their master was in the one talent case.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. You'll recall it's an excuse, and maybe it is. I see it as I'm gonna call it an assessment, because he says, "I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed." And then when the master comes back to him, he doesn't say, "No, that's not true." He says, "You knew that was the case. You knew that I reap where I do not sow, and I gather where there's not seed. So therefore you're lazy." So he had a respect for the master, but he wasn't motivated by wanting to earn the master more. He was motivated by fear or laziness or whatever the motivation. It certainly wasn't love. He certainly didn't know what he needed to do or feel confident enough to do a better job than what he did.
And bearing it and not losing any of it to him is better than losing the whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
But in the end, he lost the whole thing.
yeah.
Take it all away.
Okay, I lost my place on here. Let's see where we are.
Well, I think one of the lessons from this is we should be busy.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
And at least trying.
Right, when the master shows up, it's like the unjust steward, that's over the household, and he warns them, about, that unfaithful servant that's beating the others. The master is gonna show up when you don't expect him to, so just always be busy, be working, doing the work, and what happens when you do the work? What's the outcome of doing the work?
You get fruitful.
Say again here.
I said you get fruitful.
I think there's a lot of correct answers to that.
Yeah, I know.
And where I was coming up to what we've already talked a little bit about with excuses, just throughout the history of the Bible. You can go back to Adam and Eve, Genesis 3. Both of them made excuses for what they did. You can go to Moses, making excuses and pleading with God. And also in Luke 14, the parable of the Great Supper. it's just easy. It's the guilt whenever we do something wrong. There's got to be some reason for it. Not that we're wrong, we're culpable. It's that we want to make excuses for it. And God expects us to do something of value with what time we have here and what He's entrusted us with, which is our talent. Let's see. And sin is not just about doing wrong; it's about or doing something evil. Sometimes it's just not doing something that's good, and either way, it's sin. And James 4:17, probably every one of us in here is familiar with it. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it's sin. So it's taking action and doing something with what we have. Now, like the master who came back, Jesus is coming back. And let's get back over to Matthew 25. In verse 31, getting past the parable, Matthew paints a picture of the resurrection and the judgment when Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. And it's coming. He's going to come back and hold us accountable. Now, this really was only a test for those servants. A test that, depending on how they did, there was going to be more to come, as we've read. He wanted them to put their talents to good use and definitely not lose all of it. Look in verse, still in Matthew 25, verse 21. And it's really pretty much the same as verse 23. You were faithful over a few things, and I will make you a ruler over many things. Verse 24 through 25, again, we see the one talent servant blaming the master. And 26 through 30, we see condemnation, you wicked and lazy servant. Cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. So in the world, God is so often viewed as this soft and kind and loving God, which really He is, but just not in the light so many people think. We all know people in the world that think that God, He just loves us, and everything's so good. He understands, and He's going to forgive me, and I can go on doing the things I'm doing. I think we can see from this parable, it's just not that way. The way God loves us is totally different than that. And if you look all through the Old Testament, God dealing with the Jews, dealing with others, so many people lost their lives. That's not the God that people really seem to understand that He is. And in this parable, we really see how the master treated those servants, and it's the symbolism of God. I also made a note on here that means something to me, and this kind of sums it up really at this point. Inactivity, unfruitfulness, and unused talents equals what we read in here: laziness and wickedness. The love of God includes absolute expectations of obedience, and we're to use what we have, and it all again belongs to Him. And He expects His people, who are His willing servants, to be busy and fruitful in His kingdom. And I've got several verses here. I need to have someone read each of these. Will someone read Titus 2 and 14 in just a minute? Let me get these listed out first. Who wants to do that one? Okay, and then Titus 3:1. Who wants that one? Titus 3:1. Okay, Sean. And when you do 1, also do 14. 3:1 and 14. Then Ephesians 2:10. Who wants that? Okay. And John 15:1 and 2. Okay. That was Cody. John 15:1 and 2. And then Romans 2 and 6. You want that one? Yeah. And 2 Corinthians 5 and 10. Got it. Okay, so let's hear Titus 2 and 14.
Titus 2:14.
Right.
Who gave himself for us to redeem us from every lawless deed and to purify for himself a people for his own possession, zealous for good deeds.
Okay, and then Titus 3:1.
Remind them to be subject to rulers, to authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good deed, to slander no one, not to be contentious, to be gentle, showing every consideration for all people. So I read 1 and 2. 10.
And 14, 3 and 14.
Our people must always learn to engage in good deeds to meet pressing needs so that they will not be unproductive.
Ephesians 2 and 10.
For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them.
Okay, John 15:1 through 2.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit.
Romans 2 and 6.
Who will render to each person according to his deeds.
Okay, and then 2 Corinthians 5 and 10.
For we must all be made manifest before the judgment seat of Christ. That each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he hath done, whether it be good or bad.
God expects us to produce. Let's look further into Matthew 25 and go to verse 31. Matthew 25, starting in verse 31, and notice the works that are described here. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom, prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison or come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. We're going to go on to 46. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. It's all really the same as the parable when you get down to it. God expects us to do things and use what he's given to us. Yes, ma'am.
In mixed preaching throughout the years. Brother, you know, once they're baptized, they're zealous, what can I do? And then there's others that I can't do anything. But they don't realize that it's not just sitting down and teaching someone. There's all these factors that come into having that class to be able to teach people. And that's where, when someone says, well, I can't read very well, I can't this or I can't that, but do what you can. And all you need to do is ask elders, preachers, and so forth in the congregation at things that help in this. And you don't even have to talk to anybody to do it.
You know, that makes me think about singing.
Oh,
How many times have we sat, and I hate to admit it, I've got a music education. I don't have a great voice, but I can sure read music, and I know when I hear something's not right. I've had to really learn to enjoy sitting next to someone that doesn't sing well. And to be honest with you, I like it now because I know what they're doing. They are singing to God from their heart. And that's a whole lot different than somebody that's just focused on the music and the notes. And these people that maybe don't sing so well, they're doing a great thing. And that's kind of what you're talking about. It's just, if you can't sing well, sing out. So
He didn't tell us to sing well. He told us to
just
sing.
sing.
And it ends up, to your point, when I was younger, yeah, that's a couple of years ago. There was a young gentleman in the congregation who couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but he would sing out, to your point, and he was praising God. And he led singing. He was still praising God. You don't have to be perfect to do that.
And don't be distracted by it. Sing right with them.
That's right.
So,
Sometimes that's hard, but yeah.
no, for sure. We are down to 5 minutes. I'm gonna jump forward here. But in conclusion, I really just don't have much of a voice right now. It's hard to read this parable and to not do self-examination. Would you agree? I mean, we can all do something more than what we're doing. And I know I can. And frankly, that's something I'm trying to do right now. And I'm just going to say, may not see it.
that first surgery, Michael,
What's that?
that first surgery really is a puncher.
Yeah, for sure.
And cast out ye out the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There shall be the weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't want to go there.
I don't either. And it sure is fun doing things and using what we've got if we start doing that. I mean, if we're doing that. And a note I put on here was it's easy to fill a spot in the pew upstairs and not use your talents. Yes, sir.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the lesson that Ben Metzger gave, and he had the rope down the middle, like the eternal perspective, right? Of thinking that the time that we have and the talents we have, or the means, right? And that changes throughout our lives too, but thinking about that and, you know, where we're going, right? Are we using those things each day to the best of our abilities, having that eternal perspective, right? Rather than just kind of what's right in front of us that day.
You know, if we just read the parable of the talents, we're thinking about money maybe, and it's easy to just stay down that line. There's so many other things that this brings to mind. And again, just some notes I put down here for myself, like teaching, whether it's publicly or just one-on-one with someone. Anyone is capable of doing that. Praying, even things, I mean, there's so many tasks with the church, filling the trays for the Lord's Supper. I mean, just think that those don't just all of a sudden appear. Somebody does that, right? And that's something that people can help with. Calling on the sick and the lonely, or picking someone up, bringing them services. Preparing oneself to become a deacon, or later on in life to become an elder. Patting someone on the back and telling them that it's great to see them, and really meaning it. Yes, sir.
The other thing, it's good for us to do that, but it's also good for us to encourage the young people. Get one of the young people to help you do those things so that they get used into the habit of doing things, not just sitting back and saying, I can do that.
That is a great point. It really is. And the example that we can set for the younger folks. Another thing I put down here was asking someone how their soul is doing, Randall. Always good about that. It's not just how are you doing. I mean, really, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are things going? How was your week? And really want to know how your week was. Bringing someone a little bag of cookies. Maybe put a note in it, something like that. And by the way, I like chocolate chip. But that's pretty much everything I've got. This parable is really self-explanatory. It's not hard. It's just we can expand it out farther than what we read actually in the parable to all the things that we have the opportunity to do to edify God. That's what it amounts to. Yes, sir.
Just a little story I used to tell my girls, some of you've heard it, when I would have a Bible study sometimes with a young couple that had small children. Of course, children can sometimes, as most of us know, be a distraction in a setting like that. And I would tell my girls the story about an old preacher that was farming, and somebody came from another congregation to get him because he had some knowledge on a subject they really needed. And the preacher said, I'm harvesting my oats. I can't come now. If I don't get my oats in the barn, I won't have food for the winter. And the fellow that came to get him said, well, I can't preach, but he said, I can harvest oats. You go preach, and I'll stay here and get your oats in the barn. Now, the moral of the story is, who really provided a lot of the success for the meeting? Well, both of them did, but it was just in different ways. And I would tell my girls regarding these younger couples that would have small children, you may not be able to teach the class just yet, but you can help watch their children so I can. So I would ask them occasionally, how about going with me and harvesting some oats tonight?
I'll remember that. Thanks, everybody.